Imagine you finally hit that massive financial milestone,
Yeah, the big one.
right? You have $500,000 to spend on a house.
Which is a huge achievement.
It really is. For a lot of people, that represents years of saving, incredibly careful financial planning, and just the exciting prospect of finally securing a beautiful home in a top-tier school district.
You start looking at listings, getting excited.
Exactly. You get your pre-approval letter all printed out, and you drive through these leafy, picturesque neighborhoods.
The ones you've always wanted to live in.
Right. But then you pull up to an open house, and reality hits you like a ton of bricks.
Hard.
Because you realize that your $500,000 isn't actually buying you a house at all.
No.
You are just buying the dirt it sits on.
It is a staggering realization for anyone stepping into this market right now.
It's wild.
It really is. I mean, you walk onto a property fully expecting to check the water pressure or look at the kitchen updates.
Normal house hunting stuff.
Exactly. And instead, you realize the person standing next to you is mentally measuring the lot for a bulldozer.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled to have you with us. Today, we are looking at a phenomenon that is fundamentally rewriting the rules of homeownership in some very specific, highly desirable suburbs.
It's a massive shift.
It is.
Yeah.
We're going through a fascinating market analysis from the SEER team, focusing on a structural shift in places like Chester County, Pennsylvania, along with Delaware County, Montgomery County, and Newcastle County down in Delaware.
Yeah, that whole corridor.
Right. And the analysis uses a very specific term for this. They call it the Californication of the housing market.
Which is such a striking term.
It is. But just to be clear right up front,
Yeah.
when they say Californication, they don't mean we're suddenly getting palm trees and perfect surfing weather in Chester County.
Sadly, no.
Right. They're talking about the rapid importation of a hyper-aggressive, land-first, West Coast buying psychology into a traditional East Coast market.
And our mission today is to really get under the hood of this shift, because this isn't your standard story about homes getting a little more expensive during a hot spring market.
Like a normal fluctuation.
Right. We are talking about a permanent structural change where the land itself has become the ultimate asset.
And the physical house sitting on top of it is almost incidental.
Exactly. So we are going to look right past that initial sticker shock to analyze exactly why this is happening.
We'll examine this clash of buyer psychologies.
And we are going to explain why the common advice of, just wait for the market to cool off.
Which you hear all the time.
All the time. Why that might be one of the most historically flawed strategies you could adopt right now.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core thesis from our source material centers on a number that is going to make a lot of local buyers wince.
Yeah, bracing for it.
And that's $500,000.
Right.
In premium markets, think Westchester, Garnet Valley, Unionville, and Media.
Really desirable spots.
Very desirable. In those places, $500,000 simply no longer buys you a move-in ready home.
Not even close.
It buys you a tear down. It essentially buys you the right to bring in a wrecking ball, demolish whatever structure is currently sitting there, and start completely over.
And this isn't isolated to just one fancy street or one specific luxury borough.
No, it's everywhere.
This is happening district-wide. And the crucial element to understand here is that this is not a temporary spike.
Right, it's not a bubble.
Exactly. The market isn't just running a fever that will eventually break. The price floor has permanently reset.
Which is terrifying for buyers.
It is. But builders are aggressively targeting these specific properties because they look at the math and realize that the intrinsic value of the buildable land completely justifies the cost of demolition.
They aren't trying to save the house.
No, they aren't buying a house to flip it with some new paint and subway tile. They are buying an empty canvas.
Wait, hold on. If a builder or a buyer is dropping $500,000 just to tear a place down, are they just being reckless with their money?
It looks that way to a local.
Right. Because do they genuinely calculate the value of the dirt differently than a local buyer would? Because to someone who grew up in these towns, spending that kind of money on a house you're going to destroy sounds like absolute insanity.
That is exactly the friction point. To understand why the floor has reset so dramatically, we have to look at where these buyers are coming from.
The migration aspect.
Yes. This brings us to the how we got here phase. Chester County and these surrounding areas have always carried a premium.
They have top school districts.
Plenty of open space, great proximity to Philadelphia, Wilmington, the broader I-95 corridor.
It's always been a great place to live.
Right. And for decades, local buyers understood this premium. The prices were high, but they were legible.
They made sense within the context of the local economy.
Precisely. But then, the nature of work fundamentally changed.
Remote work.
Remote and hybrid work environments completely untethered high-earning professionals from expensive coastal metropolitan areas.
Right. So suddenly, buyers from New York City, northern New Jersey, Washington, D.C., northern Virginia,
And a rapidly growing contingent from California.
hence the Californication.
Exactly. They realized they didn't have to live in a microscopic, wildly expensive apartment just to keep their jobs.
So they looked at a map, found Chester County, and saw a quality of life they absolutely loved.
And the prices.
To a local, they look astronomical.
But to someone relocating from a coastal metro,
These prices feel like a time machine.
they really do. They look at a property and genuinely think they're getting an absolute steal.
It's like you go to an open house in media, you notice the roof is actively caving in.
Right.
And before you could even point it out, a guy who just moved from San Francisco is like, I'll take it and I'll waive the inspection. Actually, I don't even need the house. Just leave the dirt.
What's fascinating here is the sheer culture clash of those expectations.
Two different worlds.
Completely. These coastal relocators arrive with a deeply ingrained buying psychology. In their home markets, you do not casually browse on a Sunday and offer under the asking price.
You'd be laughed out of the room.
Exactly. You expect to compete incredibly hard. You expect to pay well over the asking price as a standard rule of engagement.
And critically, you view the land itself as the primary asset.
Yes. When they bring that hyper-competitive land-first mentality into the Chester County market, it creates an environment that local buyers have no framework to compete against.
Because why would they?
Right. The relocator isn't trying to be malicious or intentionally blow up the market. They're just applying the only real estate survival tactics they know.
Which brings us to the bidding war gap. This is the stark reality of what happens when these two completely different buyer psychologies collide on a single property.
It gets brutal.
It really does. Let's say you have a relocator from D.C. competing against a local move-up buyer.
Like a family trying to upgrade from their starter home.
Yeah, maybe they just had their second kid. The gap in their offers isn't a few $1,000s. Looking at the numbers from this region, the gap is typically $50,000 to $100,000 over the asking price.
Which is massive.
It's huge. The local buyer is often stretching their absolute maximum budget just to meet the asking price,
They literally cannot fathom throwing an extra $100,000 on top of it.
let alone finance it.
And that leads to local buyers consistently losing out. But to really grasp the massive scale of this dynamic, we have to look at the aggregate data of these losses.
It's staggering.
It's not just one local family losing out occasionally. It's a systemic wave of capital washing over the available inventory.
I was looking at this one specific listing in the data, and honestly, the math on it stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah, the proof point.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting. We're talking about a house with an asking price of $930,000.
Which is already a huge chunk of change.
It hits the market, and it receives 13 distinct offers. Now, if you're a buyer and you scrape together an offer of $985,000,
Which is $55,000 over asking.
exactly, you probably feel like you're coming in with an absolute knockout punch.
Right, you would certainly think so. Under the old rules of the market, you're popping champagne and packing your boxes.
Right. But in this scenario, the people who offered $985,000 actually lost.
They didn't even get the house.
They were just part of the pile of rejections.
Let's actually chew on the math of that single transaction for a second, because it is the key to understanding why this market feels so relentless.
Okay, let's hear it.
You had 13 buyers. Only one of them won the house. That means 12 sets of buyers lost.
Right.
The average offer from those losing buyers was about $1 million each.
Wow.
Think about what that actually means on a macro level. In a single day, on a single property, $12 million in pre-approved, highly motivated, ready-to-close purchasing power walked away empty-handed.
$12 million.
Just sidelined.
Just sitting on the sidelines from one weekend. And those buyers don't just throw up their hands, decide real estate isn't for them, and evaporate into thin air.
No, they're still out there.
They still have their pre-approvals.
Mm.
And now they are incredibly frustrated.
That frustration is exactly the engine driving this. That $12 million doesn't disappear. It goes right back into the buyer pool, hungrier and more aggressive for the next house.
That makes total sense.
Human psychology dictates that every time you lose a bidding war, especially when you thought you made a strong offer, you become more aggressive on your next attempt.
You're tired of losing.
The buyer who just lost out on their third offer is far more dangerous to compete against than someone making their very first bid. The demand doesn't dissipate after a closed sale. It compounds.
It's like a pressure cooker.
Exactly. Now, multiply that compounding frustration across every single competitive listing in Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, and Newcastle counties over a busy spring season.
The numbers get dizzying.
The scale of frustrated capital pooling in this region is almost incomprehensible. It's not a shortage of people wanting to buy. It is a massive shortage of homes for a horde of buyers who are already standing right at the front door with checkbooks open.
It's easy to get lost in the sheer scale of that 12 million sitting on the sidelines. It feels like a math equation.
But it's very real.
It is. There are actual families attached to those pre-approvals. And more importantly, there are families who already live in these towns.
The locals.
Yeah. What happens to the local buyer who has been saving up for 5 years, whose kids are enrolled in the local elementary school, and who always plan to just move up to a slightly bigger house down the street?
The reality for that local move-up buyer is quite sobering, and the analysis lays it out very plainly.
What are their options?
They are generally forced into one of two options. Option one, they rent and wait. They sell their current place, move into a rental, and cross their fingers, hoping for some sort of structural softening of the market that will let them buy back in.
Which, as we'll get to in a minute, is a highly risky bet.
Very risky. And option two is that they buy a significantly smaller house than they had planned for.
So they compromise.
Massively. They are actively accepting a home that doesn't actually fit the next chapter of their lives simply because the house that does fit is completely out of reach.
The analysis uses a very powerful phrase to describe this. They call it a quiet displacement.
It's a great term.
It really is. It's an important distinction to make for you, the listener, if you're trying to understand how communities change. We aren't talking about loud evictions.
Right, there are no moving trucks showing up in the middle of the night forcing people out.
It's a slow, quiet realization. People are being economically priced into a much smaller, compromised version of the life they had fully expected to live.
In their own hometown.
Exactly. In the very hometown they've always loved. It's the emotional toll of watching your own community's identity shift around you and realizing you no longer have the purchasing power to fully participate in it.
It is a profound emotional reality. You see a lot of deep frustration and resignation, people just making peace with a massive economic wave they have zero control over.
Yeah.
However, to maintain a fully balanced view of what's happening in these neighborhoods, we also have to look at the flip side of this equation.
The winners in all this.
Yes. Because while the move-up buyer is feeling displaced, someone else is experiencing the exact opposite. We have to talk about the sudden creation of immense generational wealth.
That's a great point, because for every buyer getting outbid by $100,000, there is a local seller sitting across the table having the absolute best financial day of their life.
Precisely. Imagine a homeowner who bought their property 30 years ago for somewhere between $180,000 and $280,000.
A normal middle-class purchase back then.
Exactly. Under the old rules of the market, they might have expected a nice, modest return on that investment to pad their retirement.
But today,
because that price floor has completely reset, they are cashing out massive, life-changing generational equity in a single transaction.
wow.
They are looking at the exact same market forces that are displacing the younger local buyers, but they are experiencing it as a winning lottery ticket.
So it's a huge windfall.
It is. So you have this incredibly complex dynamic where frustration, resignation, and quiet optimism are all existing in the exact same neighborhoods, on the exact same streets, at the exact same time.
So what does this all mean? When you look at an intractable situation like this, insatiable demand, zero inventory, skyrocketing prices, the traditional economic instinct is to look for a supply-side fix.
Naturally.
It's Economics 101, right?
Yeah.
Shouldn't dropping interest rates provide some relief? Or better yet, shouldn't builders just construct more houses to meet the demand?
It's the logical question to ask, but the data systematically dismantles that hope.
How so?
First, let's address the idea of waiting for the market to cool or for interest rates to drop. The reason there is no ceiling in sight for these prices is that the ultimate constraint on this market is not buyer demand.
What is it then?
The ultimate constraint is land.
Just physical space.
Yes. The premium school districts we are discussing, the ones driving this entire Californication effect, are already largely built out.
There's nowhere left to build.
Exactly. There are no massive tracts of empty farmland left to turn into sprawling subdivisions in the most desirable areas.
So when people say they're waiting for inventory to rebound, they're waiting for something that physically cannot happen.
Right.
The earth itself has run out in these specific zip codes.
There is no magical supply mechanism that can reset a price floor when the underlying land is gone.
And what about interest rates?
If interest rates do drop, it won't magically rebuild inventory. Think about that frustrated $12 million we talked about earlier.
The sidelined money.
Yes. All a rate drop will do is invite even more buyers, people who have been sitting on the fence waiting for cheaper borrowing costs, into a market that is already starved for homes.
So it makes it worse.
Much worse, it won't lower prices. It will just pour gasoline on the bidding wars.
But I want to push back on the land constraint for a second, because the analysis does mention areas where there is active new construction happening.
Sure.
Places like Newcastle County, Downingtown, and the Great Valley Corridor. Why isn't that new construction acting as a pressure release valve for all this pent-up demand?
That's a fair point.
If I'm a buyer who just lost my fifth bidding war, why don't I just go buy a newly built house 10 miles away?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that new construction fails to relieve the pressure for two very specific reasons.
Okay.
The first reason is purely financial cost. Builders are dealing with their own inflated costs for materials, labor, and the scarce land they did manage to acquire.
Everything costs more right now.
Right. As a result, new construction in these markets is priced significantly higher than comparable resale homes.
It was not a cheaper backup option.
Not at all. It doesn't act as a relief valve. It acts as a parallel, even more expensive market, sitting entirely above the new resale floor.
Okay, so they price out a chunk of the buyers right out of the gate. But the second reason the analysis gives is even more interesting to me because it goes back to that clash of buyer psychologies.
The preference aspect.
Yes. It's not just about the math. It's about preference.
That's right. When buyers in these high-end markets are given the choice, they actively prefer established neighborhoods.
They don't just want a new box to live in.
Exactly. New construction delivers a brand new house, but resale delivers a place.
A community.
Buyers want the mature landscaping. They want the 50-year-old oak trees shading the sidewalks. They want proximity to historic town centers, walkable streets, and a deeply established community identity.
And you can't just build that overnight.
You simply cannot fast-track a 50-year-old neighborhood, no matter how much capital you have.
Which means all of that frustrated capital, that $12 million from the single losing house, doesn't pivot and go buy a newly built house in a barren subdivision
They refuse to.
because they specifically want the charm of the established neighborhood. That massive pool of money stays trapped inside the existing resale market.
It creates a closed loop.
Wow. Resale inventory is scarce. What does exist attracts a dozen aggressive offers. New construction is both more expensive and lacks the charm they want, so the buyers just cycle through losses.
The demand compounds.
And the new elevated price floor holds completely firm.
It is a self-sustaining cycle fueled by an unyielding preference for a finite resource. The buyers are essentially trapped by their own desires.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening journey through the dynamics laid out by the SEER team. As we wrap up today's deep dive, let's bring it all back to you, the listener.
The big takeaway.
Exactly. Why should you care about the Californication of Chester County and its surrounding areas?
It matters whether you're buying or not.
It really does. Whether you are currently trying to navigate a brutal housing market yourself, whether you are an observer analyzing local economic shifts, or whether you are just watching your own hometown change before your eyes, the lesson here is vital.
You can't rely on the old metrics.
Relying on historical market trends is a dangerous game when the fundamental underlying asset, the buildable land itself, simply runs out. The old rules do not apply when the board you are playing on fundamentally shrinks.
That's the reality of a built-out district.
As the analysis clearly outlines, waiting for prices to soften in these built-out districts is a strategy with absolutely no structural or historical support right now.
It's just a gamble.
In a market where $500,000 buys a teardown, strategy has to replace hope. You have to understand the psychologies of the people you are bidding against.
You really do.
You have to recognize that an offer from a coastal relocator isn't just a number. It's a completely different philosophy on the value of dirt.
Very well said.
And most importantly, you have to accept the new baseline reality of the market you are actually in. rather than the market you remember from 5 years ago?
This raises an important question, and it is something I want you to mull over long after we sign off today.
With that?
Well, we have established that this incredible demand is driven by buyers who inherently prefer the unique community identity, the historic charm, and the mature landscapes of established neighborhoods.
Right. They want the oak trees and the character.
Yet the new market baseline heavily incentivizes builders to purchase $500,000 teardowns, completely demolish them, and build massive modern new structures in their place.
Right.
At what point does the aggressive pursuit of a community's historic charm actually end up bulldozing the very architectural and cultural identity that made the town so desirable in the first place?